form has been generated, we haven't necessarily created any content within the form itself. So as it says here, if we just click the checkout form, that will allow us to add some fields to this form and have a functionality and interact with the form going forward. So let's hit checkout form now. Okay, and this is going to show us the form building screen. Okay, we can see up at the top there are a variety of different fields to choose from, and I'm just going to go over these now to see the intentions, how we can add these to the form, and what sort of benefits that they can bring. So the first thing that we have here, if I mouse over it, we can see is a add new field, and this is just the generic any type of field goes. So it will just be a drop down when you select this field to pick all of the different options available to you. But I would always recommend that, as we can see, the options that these can be are simply the shortcuts across the form over here. And it makes it a lot easier just to pick the specific one you had in mind at that time, instead of using the add a new field option. But depending on your preference, this is a completely viable choice. The next item here is to add a new section. What this will allow us to do is divide the form into different areas, giving it a bit more of a visual appealing look, as well as helping sort of break out the structuring of the form appropriately. And in terms of a recommendation, I would say, of course, we would have our different sections, maybe one about the user details, and then specifically the details regarding the issue in question, and it just separates the form a lot nicer. Again, we'll be utilizing this field a couple of times in our form creation today, so we'll see how that looks in a bit. Next to that, we have our text field. And as we can see, there is a drop down here, which is going to allow us to select 3 different sizes of text string. So the functionality is the same in any one we choose, either a short, medium or long string. It is simply just the display length that changes. A medium string is very good for names and email addresses, for instance. If you need a bit more information, you can utilize a long string. If it's just going to be for a number, then you can use the short string. Next to that, we have our text area. And the text area is very similar, but instead of it being a singular line of text, it's going to be for larger sentences or paragraphs that you can utilize here. Again, if we look at the drop down, we can see that this includes short text, medium and long. This is just represented by a different size text area, allowing for more content to be applied and read at one time. There is also the addition of the BB code text area, which in terms of size is the same as the long text, but the difference will be that we can drag and drop file attachments or anything like that into the text area, as well as it just being for text. We also have our checkboxes, multiple options to choose from here. This being either a singular checkbox, allowing for maybe a confirmation, that's what the tick might be for, or something along those lines, saying maybe you've read or understood the terms and conditions, as you see on sort of application forms, etc. Or a multiple checkbox, which will allow you to have a series of choices, different values, if you will, and apply them into these additional checkboxes there. The checkboxes will then, of course, allow you to select multiple choices out of those selections, choosing a variety of different preferences or something along those lines. Next to that is our radio buttons, and we can see here that this doesn't have a drop down. It is simply just one choice that we have, and this is, of course, as you would expect, for radio buttons, allowing us to again define a series of different values similar to the multiple checkboxes, but then being radio buttons, of course, we can only choose one of those choices. And we'll be utilizing this field in the form. We'll see how that works shortly. Next, have a select field. Again, multiple choices that we have here, either for select or multiple select. The functionality is very similar to the radio buttons in terms of applying values. If we specify the singular select, we can only choose one of those options. However, of course, applying multiple select can allow us to choose from more than one of the values applied. We then have a date field. This is going to allow us for 3 different variations, either just a standard date field where you pick a specific date from a calendar display, a date drop down, which is going to have 3 different areas to represent your days, months and years, as well as a last option here, which is going to be a date and time field, which in terms of its functionality will be the exact same as the date field, but just to the right of it, it's also going to have a timestamp, allowing you to be a bit more specific of when something occurred and implement a time frame in there as well. The next item is the financial field, and this is very similar to in terms of sizing and functionality of a small text string. The difference between the two is purely that this is fully intended for sort of a financial amount. So if you wanted to create like an expense form or something along those lines, this would be a very good field to use. In terms of display and everything like that, as I mentioned, it is very similar to the text string. The only real difference between these two is that this field will automatically round up to 2 decimal places. So if you are applying any sort of financial additions or calculations within the form, which is entirely possible, using just a singular text string, depending on the calculation, might create more than just the 2 decimal places. And again, from a financial expense form or something, that's going to look a bit strange. So we can use the financial field here to automatically round that up to the 2 decimal places and allow for that sort of display and better functionality. Next to that, we have our label and notice fields, and I pair these together purely because their intention is the same, they're just displayed slightly differently. So both the label and notice are for the form builder to provide some additional context or information within the form without a follow-on field for the end users to write any content in. It's simply just there for a notification, an alert of some sort, maybe just to remind people to fill out certain fields, and if they don't, the form might not go through a correct workflow or something very similar to that. The only real difference between the two is that the label will be pinned to the right hand side of your form, listed like a side sort of, I guess, like a post-it note in that regard, whereas the notice can be applied directly into the form and located anywhere there. It all is down to a different preference depending on the type of form that you're creating. But again, from my own sort of preference, I would normally suggest the notice field purely because the label actually minimizes the amount of screen real estate you have for your form, as it will limit the sort of column width in terms of what other data can be added to the form there. We also have a user list field. This will in terms of functionality, or display at least, be very similar to the standard select, where you will have either the choice of a variety of items from a drop-down. The major difference between these two is within the select field, where you create your own values. The user list is going to allow you to pick from the people within your people staff list, any users there, and you can define through permissions, as we'll see shortly building the form, whether or not this is going to be everyone from your staff list or a particular group or role of people. And then that will of course be then populated into the drop-down field there. And the last couple of fields we have now are simply just the documents, and again multiple options that we have here, either simply being a document, and this is referring to pulling something from the document management system. So when we utilize this option, it's going to be a file picker. We can select a document, it'll open up the document management system, go through the relevant folders that of course we have permissions to, and select that document and pull it through to the InfoCapture form. Whereas file is going to of course be your standard file upload, allowing you to add an attachment from your own local machine. The HTML field, this will allow you to again add a very large text area, larger in fact than the standard text areas we have provided here, and will also incorporate a CK editor features into that, allowing for a very robust text area, and of course the ability to implement HTML into that if you wish. Then the last real field that we have on the form is the signature pad, and what this will allow us to do is sign off and confirm anything using our signature within the form directly. So again, this is very useful for approvals, anything like that that we might need. We can have a signature on here, and that can either be typed or scribbled if you're feeling brave with your mouse. Any sort of signature that you apply in there will put a date and timestamp as well. The last two real fields here are for groups and roles, which will allow you to apply a series or a list of people within a certain group or a certain role onto the form directly. The last item on this list is not actually something you apply to the form, but from a form building perspective will convert the form into a table, making it a bit easier to find the certain fields as well as configuring or deleting them. It won't translate onto the front end. It's purely from this admin perspective when you're building the form that you can display it in this table format. Okay,